The dust swirled around the overturned stagecoach like angry spirits dancing in the desert heat. Elena Martinez pressed her face against the splintered wood, her heart hammering against her ribs as the sound of gunfire echoed through the canyon. 3 days ago, she had been preparing for her wedding to Thomas Whitman, the banker's son in Tucson. Now she was trapped in a nightmare that seemed to have no end. The bandits had struck without warning on the mountain pass. Her father, Don Carlos Martinez, had insisted on the finest coach for his daughter's journey to her new life. The irony wasn't lost on Elena now, as she crouched behind the wreckage of what was supposed to be her chariot to happiness. The ornate carriage that had once been her pride now served as her only protection against the bullets flying overhead. Elena's fingers trembled as she clutched a small leather pouch containing her mother's rosary. Maria Martinez had died when Elena was 12, leaving behind only memories in this precious relic. Everything else from her past life in Santa Fe seemed like a distant dream. The hacienda with its whitewashed walls, the gardens where she had learned to read, the stable where she had secretly learned to ride like the vaqueros her father employed, all felt like they belonged to someone else now. The shooting stopped suddenly, and an eerie silence settled over the canyon. Elena could hear her own breathing, quick and shallow, mixed with the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. She carefully lifted her head above the coach's edge and saw them approaching. 5 men on horseback, their faces hidden by bandanas, their guns still smoking in the afternoon sun. "Check for survivors," one of them called out in Spanish. His voice was rough, like gravel scraped across stone. Elena recognized the accent of the borderlands where Mexican and American territories blurred into lawless stretches of desert and mountain. Elena's mind raced. She could play dead, but they would surely check the bodies. She could run, but where? The canyon walls rose steep and unforgiving on both sides, and her traveling dress would hardly allow for climbing. The sound of boots on gravel grew closer, and she made her decision. Standing up slowly with her hands raised, Elena stepped out from behind the coach. "Please," she said in Spanish, then repeated in English, "I have money. My father will pay whatever you ask." The bandits stopped, and she could see their eyes studying her over their masks. Her traveling dress, though torn and dusty, was clearly expensive. The small diamond earrings her father had given her for her 18th birthday caught the light. Even in her disheveled state, she looked like exactly what she was, the daughter of a wealthy ranchero. "Well, well," the leader said, dismounting from his horse. He was tall and lean, with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Looks like we found ourselves a little dove far from her nest."
Elena lifted her chin,
drawing on the pride that had been bred into her bones. "My name is Elena Martinez. My father is Don Carlos Martinez of Santa Fe. He will pay handsomely for my safe return." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Martinez? You mean the man who's been selling land to the gringos? It's the one who sided with the Americans when they came through?" Elena's heart sank. Her father's political choices during the Mexican-American War had made him enemies on both sides of the border. He had believed that cooperation with the Americans would bring prosperity and peace to their region. Instead, it had brought suspicion from his Mexican neighbors and contempt from the American settlers who saw him as just another Mexican too. "Be pushed aside. That changes things, doesn't it, boys?" the leader continued. "Maybe this little dove isn't worth as much as she thinks." The other bandits chuckled, and Elena felt fear creep up her spine like ice water. She had heard stories of what happened to women captured by bandits. The tales whispered by servants in the kitchen had painted pictures that haunted her dreams. However, the leader said, walking closer until she could see the stubble on his jaw above the bandana, "You might be useful in other ways. A pretty face like yours could bring a good price in certain places." Elena's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to remain standing. She would not show weakness, not to these men. Her mother had once told her that sometimes courage was simply refusing to fall down when everything inside you wanted to collapse. "You will regret this," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My father has friends everywhere. The Apaches respect him. The American soldiers know his name. He cannot hide from everyone." The leader's eyes narrowed above his mask. Apaches. He exchanged glances with his men. Your father deals with the Apaches. They have been trading partners for years, Alina said, sensing she had struck something important. Chief Running Bear considers my family under his protection. It wasn't entirely true. Her father had traded with various Apache bands, but protection was something that could change with the wind in this harsh land. The mention of Apache connections had clearly affected the bandits.
Tie her up,
the leader ordered, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. We'll camp here tonight and decide what to do with her in the morning. As rough hands bound her wrists, Alina closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's face. Maria Martinez had been a woman of faith and strength, who had taught her daughter that God never gave anyone more than they could bear. Alina wondered if her mother had ever imagined her daughter would need to bear something like this. The sun was beginning to set, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound seemed to echo the desperation growing in Alina's heart. Her past life of comfort and security was gone, destroyed as thoroughly as the stagecoach that had carried her toward what was supposed to be her future. As the bandits made camp, Alina stared up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky and wondered if she would live to see another sunset. The fire crackled in the darkness, sending sparks dancing toward the star-filled sky. Alina sat with her back against a boulder, her wrists still bound, watching the bandits as they shared a bottle of whiskey and argued in low voices. She couldn't make out all their words, but she caught enough to understand they were debating her fate. Her stomach growled with hunger, but fear had stolen her appetite anyway. The men had offered her nothing but water since capturing her, and even that had been grudgingly given. Alina tried to focus on staying alert, knowing that any moment of inattention could mean the difference between life and death. The leader, who the others called Ramirez, kept glancing her way. Each time their eyes met, Alina forced herself not to look away. Her father had taught her that showing fear to dangerous men was like showing blood to wolves. Even bound and helpless, she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Should just take what we can get for her in Juarez, one of the men was saying. He was younger than the others, with nervous energy that made him constantly fidget with his gun belt. Quick money, no complications, and have half the territory hunting us. Ramirez shook his head. Heard what she said about the Apaches? Running Bear's band has been quiet lately, but they're still dangerous. We don't need them on our trail. Alina's heart leaped at this confirmation that the Apache name carried weight even among these hardened criminals. Her father's trading relationship with various Apache leaders might be her only chance at survival. The conversation was interrupted by the soft sound of a pebble falling somewhere in the darkness beyond the firelight. The bandits froze, hands moving instinctively to their weapons. In the desert, every sound had meaning, and something had disturbed the natural quiet of the canyon. Rodriguez, check the horses, Ramirez ordered quietly. Martinez, you take the north side. Everyone else, stay alert. Alina watched as the men moved with practiced caution. Whatever else they were, these were not amateurs. They had survived in this harsh land by being careful, by assuming every shadow might hide an enemy. The fact that they were nervous made Alina even more afraid. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then Rodriguez's voice cut through the night, tight with fear. The horses are gone. Alina's breath caught in her throat. In the desert, losing horses was often a death sentence. The nearest settlement was days away on foot, and the canyon offered little shelter from the brutal sun that would come with dawn. All of them demanded, his voice no longer steady. Every last one. Cut loose, not stolen. Someone wanted to trap us here. Alina saw the men's faces in the firelight, watched fear replace their earlier confidence. She had heard enough stories from the vaqueros on her father's ranch to know what this meant. Only one group in these mountains had the skill to approach so silently and the tactical knowledge to disable enemies by taking their mounts without being detected. The Apache. A new sound drifted through the night air, so soft at first that Alina wondered if she had imagined it. But the bandits heard it too, their faces turning pale in the firelight. It was singing, but not in Spanish or English. The haunting melody seemed to come from the rocks themselves, echoing off the canyon walls until it was impossible to tell where it originated. "Apache war song," whispered one of the bandits, a grizzled man with scars on his hands. "We're dead men." "Shut up," Ramirez snapped, but Alina could hear the fear in his voice now. "They're just trying to spook us." The singing stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that seemed to press against Elena's ears like a physical weight. Then a voice called out from somewhere in the darkness, speaking in accented English that carried clearly through the still air. "Men who steal from the innocent have no honor. Release the woman, and we will consider letting you walk away from this place." Elena's heart pounded. The voice was strong, confident, and somehow familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have heard it before. It definitely belonged to someone who expected to be obeyed. "Who are you?" Ramirez called back, trying to sound braver than he looked. "Show yourself. I am one who has given his word to protect those under Apache care. The woman's father trades with honor. She is under our protection." Alina stared into the darkness, straining to see the speaker. Her father had mentioned trading partners among the Apache, but she had never met any of them personally. Mexican families of her class traditionally left such business to the men, though Alina had always been curious about the people her father spoke of with such respect. "We found her fair and square," one of the bandits shouted. "Finders keepers." Low laugh echoed from the rocks. "You found her by murder and theft. There is no honor in that. This is your last chance to do what is right." Ramirez grabbed Alina roughly, pulling her to her feet and pressing his gun to her temple. The metal was cold against her skin, and she could smell the fierce wet on his clothes. "You come any closer, and the girl dies," he yelled into the darkness. Alina closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Her mother's rosary was still in her pocket, but with her hands bound, she couldn't reach it. All she could do was stand still and hope that whoever was out there in the darkness was as skilled as he sounded confident. "You think to bargain with a life that is not yours to take?" The voice was closer now, though Alina still couldn't see the speaker. "You have already shown you have no honor. Why should we believe you would keep any bargain? Because I've got nothing to lose." Ramirez was shouting now, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "You Apaches think you own this whole territory, but the world's changing. Soon there won't be any of you left." The silence that followed was different from before, charged with a dangerous energy that made the hair on Elena's arms stand up. When the voice came again, it was quieter, but somehow more frightening. "Perhaps you are right that the world is changing. But tonight, in this canyon, the old ways still hold power." Alina felt Ramirez's grip tighten on her arm, felt the gun barrel press harder against her head. She thought of her parents, of the wedding she would never have, of all the things she had planned to do with her life. The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed the despair aside. If these were to be her last moments, she would meet them with the dignity her mother had taught her. The attack, when it came, was so swift and silent that Alina barely understood what had happened. One moment Ramirez was holding her hostage, the next she was falling to her knees as his grip disappeared. The sound of the gun hitting the ground echoed off the canyon walls, followed by Ramirez's cry of pain and surprise. Around the camp, chaos erupted as shadows seemed to come alive, moving with impossible speed and silence. Lena kept her eyes squeezed shut, afraid to look, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. When the sounds of struggle finally faded, Alina remained on her knees with her eyes closed, afraid to look at what might have happened around her. The crackling of the fire seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence, and she could smell smoke, mixed with something else, something metallic that made her stomach turn. "It is safe now," came the voice that had spoken from the darkness. "Open your eyes." Alina lifted her head slowly and found herself looking up at a man unlike any she had ever seen. He was tall and lean, with long black hair that fell past his shoulders and skin bronzed by years under the desert sun. He wore buckskin pants and a shirt that seemed to blend with the shadows, and his dark eyes held a depth that seemed to see straight through to her soul. But it was his face that made her breath catch. Despite the traditional Apache dress and the eagle feather in his hair, his features showed the mixing of bloodlines that was common in the borderlands. He could have been Mexican or Spanish, or even Anglo. But there was something in his bearing, in the way he moved with absolute confidence in this harsh landscape, that marked him as purely Apache in spirit. "Who are you?" Lena whispered. Her voice barely audible. The man knelt beside her and began working at the ropes binding her wrists. His movements were gentle but efficient, and Alina noticed that his hands, though calloused from outdoor life, were careful not to hurt her as he freed her. "I am called Swift Eagle by my people," he said in English that held only the slightest trace of an accent. "Your father knows me by the name David Running Wolf. We have traded together for many seasons." Elena's memory stirred. She had heard that name mentioned in her father's business discussions, usually spoken with respect and warmth. Don Carlos had often said that David Running Wolf was one of the few men in the territory whose word could be trusted completely. Regardless of which flag flew over the land at any given time, the bandits... Alina began, then stopped, not sure. She wanted to know what had happened to them. "Gone," Swift Eagle said simply, as he finished untying her hands. They chose to fight rather than accept mercy. The choice was theirs. Alina rubbed her wrists where the ropes had chafed, grateful to have feeling returning to her fingers. She looked around the camp and saw no sign of the men who had captured her, though she noticed dark stains on the ground that she tried not to think about too closely. "My father sent you?"
Asked.
Swift Eagle shook his head as he moved to bank. "The fire. Your father does not yet know what has happened. We were hunting in these mountains when we heard the gunfire yesterday. When we investigated, we found the attack on the stagecoach and tracked the bandits here. Alina looked around, nervously, suddenly aware that there might be other Apache warriors in the darkness around them. "My brothers have gone to recover your father's horses and whatever belongings of yours that can be saved," Swift Eagle explained. "They will meet us at the sacred spring, a few miles from here. It is a safe place where you can rest before we take you home." Alina tried to stand and found her legs shaking with exhaustion and delayed shock. Swift Eagle immediately moved to steady her, his hand gentle but strong on her arm. The kindness in the gesture after the terror of the past day nearly brought tears to her eyes. "I can walk," she said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "I am sure you can," Swift Eagle replied with what might have been a small smile. "But there is no shame in accepting help when it is offered freely. Your pride is safe with me." Something in his tone made Alina look at him more carefully. There was understanding in his dark eyes, as if he recognized the struggle between her need for help and her desire to maintain dignity. It occurred to her that perhaps growing up between two worlds had taught him something about the importance of pride in the face of adversity. Swift Eagle gathered what little remained of use from the bandit camp, then turned to Alina. "The moon is bright enough to travel by, and it will be cooler. Can you manage a few miles?" Alina nodded, though she wasn't entirely certain. Her traveling dress was torn and dirty. Her shoes were meant for civilized roads rather than desert trails, and every muscle in her body ached from the tension of the past day. But the thought of staying in this place where violence had occurred made her skin crawl. As they left the canyon, Alina found herself stealing glances at her rescuer. Swift Eagle moved through the desert terrain as if he had been born to it, never seeming to hesitate about which path to take even in the uncertain moonlight. His awareness of their surroundings was complete and constant, his head turning slightly at sounds Alina couldn't even hear, his eyes scanning the shadows for dangers she would never have noticed. "You speak English very well," Alina said after. They had walked in silence for some time. She needed to hear a human voice, needed some distraction from the memories of the past day that kept threatening to overwhelm her. "I learned it from missionaries when I was young," Swift Eagle replied. "Later, I found it useful in trading with the Americans and Mexicans who came to our lands. A man who can speak the languages of different peoples can often find peaceful solutions to problems that might otherwise lead to war." Alina heard something in his voice that made her curious. "You don't sound like you approve of war." Swift Eagle was quiet for a moment, stepping carefully around a cluster of prickly pear cactus that glowed silver in the moonlight. "I have seen what war does to people," he said finally. "It takes away everything that makes us human and leaves only anger and fear behind. Sometimes it cannot be avoided, but it should never be chosen lightly." "Is that why you saved me?" Alina asked. "Avoid war?" He stopped walking and turned to look at her directly. In the moonlight, his face was serious, but not unkind. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. Your father has been an honest trader and a fair man in his dealings with my people. But even if he had not been, no woman should suffer what those men had planned for you. The simple honesty of his words touched something deep in Elena's heart. In her world of carefully arranged marriages and social obligations, she had rarely heard a man speak with such straightforward moral clarity. There were no hidden motives in his voice, no expectation of gratitude or reward, just the calm certainty of someone who had done what needed to be done. "Thank you," she said quietly. The words seemed inadequate for what he had given her, but they were all she had. Swift Eagle nodded and resumed walking. "The spring is just ahead, my brothers will have food and water waiting, and you can rest safely there. Tomorrow we will begin the journey to return you to your father." As they crested a small rise, Alina saw the gleam of water reflecting moonlight, and the dark shapes of horses and men near what must be the sacred spring Swift Eagle had mentioned. For the first time since the stagecoach had been attacked, she felt truly safe, but she also felt something else. Something she couldn't quite name as she walked beside this quiet, strong man who had appeared from the darkness to save her life. The sacred spring was more beautiful than Alina had imagined. Water bubbled up from deep underground, forming a clear pool surrounded by ancient cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade from the desert sun. 2 other Apache warriors sat by a small, smokeless fire, and they rose respectfully when Swift Eagle and Alina approached. "This is Running Bear's daughter by choice," Swift Eagle said in Apache, then repeated in Spanish for Elena's benefit. "She is under our protection until she returns to her father's house." The 2 men nodded solemnly. Alina noticed that both were older than Swift Eagle, with gray threading through their black hair, but they clearly deferred to his leadership. One of them, who introduced himself as Grey Wolf, handed Alina a bundle of clean clothes.
"My wife."
"I thought you might need these," he said in careful Spanish. "She is about your size." Alina accepted the bundle gratefully. The simple cotton dress and soft moccasins would be much more practical for desert travel than her torn and dirty traveling gown. She looked around uncertainly, and Swift Eagle seemed to understand her dilemma. "There's a grove of willows on the other side of the spring," he said. "You will have privacy there to change and wash. The water is clean and safe." Alina made her way to the secluded spot, grateful for the chance to clean away the dust and fear of the past day. As she washed in the cool spring water and changed into the borrowed clothes, she found herself thinking about Swift Eagle's words when he introduced her. Running Bear's daughter by choice. It suggested a relationship between her father and the Apache chief that went deeper than simple trading. When she returned to the fire, she found the men sharing a meal of dried meat, corn cakes, and honey. They made room for her in their circle, and Alina was touched by the natural courtesy they showed her. She had been raised to think of Apache warriors as savage and dangerous. But these men treated her with the same respect they would show any guest in their home. "Your father will be worried," Swift Eagle said as they ate. "We sent word ahead that you are safe, but it will take time to reach him." Alina nodded, thinking of Don Carlos and how frantic he must be. Her wedding to Thomas Whitman had been scheduled for the end of the week. By now, both families would know that something had gone terribly wrong. "What will happen to the wedding?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish for voicing such a concern after everything that had happened. Swift Eagle studied her face in the firelight. "Do you wish for this marriage to take place?" The question was asked so simply, so directly, that Alina found herself considering it seriously for the first time. Thomas Whitman was a good man, solid and dependable, with prospects for prosperity in the growing territory. Her father had approved of the match, and Alina had accepted it as her duty, but did she wish for it? "I thought I did," she said slowly. "It seemed like the right thing, the practical thing. Thomas is kind, and he would provide well for me." "Oh, but," Swift Eagle prompted gently. Alina looked around at the spring, at the ancient trees and the star-filled sky, at these men who had risked their lives to save a woman they barely knew, simply because it was the right thing to do. but I never felt like it was my choice. It was arranged between my father and Thomas's father, like a business agreement. I was just part of the transaction. Grey Wolf spoke up in Apache, and Swift Eagle translated. He says that, among our people, a woman's heart must agree to a marriage, or it cannot be blessed by the spirits. A marriage without the woman's true consent brings misfortune to the whole family. Alina had never heard such an idea expressed so clearly. In her world, women were expected to marry for family advantage and learn to love their husbands afterward. The notion that her feelings might actually matter in such an important decision was both thrilling and terrifying. "What if I don't know what my heart wants?" she asked. This time it was Swift Eagle who smiled, an expression that transformed his serious face and made Elena's pulse quicken in a way that surprised her. "Then perhaps you need time to listen to it. The heart speaks clearly, but only when we are quiet enough to hear." They talked late into the night, and Alina found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she had never spoken aloud before. Swift Eagle listened with an attention that made her feel truly heard for the first time in her life. He told her about growing up between the Apache world and the encroaching American one, about learning to bridge different cultures while remaining true to his own spirit. "My mother was Chiricahua Apache," he explained. "My father was a Mexican, a trader who was captured as a young man and chose to stay with the tribe. I learned early that it was possible to honor different ways of life without losing yourself." Elena found herself fascinated by his stories of life with the Apache, so different from everything she had known. There was a freedom in their way, of life that appealed to something deep inside her, something she had never acknowledged before. When they finally settled down to sleep, Elena lay on a soft blanket under the stars, feeling safer than she had in months. Not just physically safe, though she knew Swift Eagle and his companions would guard her with their lives, but safe in a deeper way. Safe to be herself, to think her own thoughts, to imagine possibilities she had never dared consider. She woke before dawn to find Swift Eagle sitting by the dying fire, keeping watch. The other men were still sleeping, but he had remained alert through the night. When he saw she was awake, he moved closer and spoke in a low voice so as not to wake the others. "Are you well?" he asked. "No bad dreams?" Lena had expected nightmares about the bandits, but instead her sleep had been peaceful. "I slept better than I have in weeks," she admitted. Swift Eagle nodded as if this didn't surprise him. "This is a healing place. The springs have been sacred to my people for generations. They wash away fear and pain, leaving room for new growth." Elena sat up and looked around at the peaceful grove. In the pre-dawn light, everything seemed touched with magic. The water murmured softly, and somewhere in the cottonwoods a bird was beginning its morning song. "Swift Eagle," she said carefully, "when we reach my father's ranch, what happens then?" He was quiet for a moment, stirring the coals with a stick. "That depends on what you choose," he said finally. "You are not the same person who left Santa Fe to be married. Perhaps your future should not be the same either." Alina felt her heart racing at the implications of his words. "What are you saying?" Swift Eagle looked directly at her, and in his dark eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. "I am saying that a woman who has survived what you have survived, who has shown the courage you have shown, deserves to choose her own path. Whether that path leads back to your old life or toward something entirely new is up to you." As the sun began to rise over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Alina felt something shifting inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand what freedom might feel like. The journey back to her father's ranch took 3 days, and with every mile, Alina felt the weight of her old life pressing down on her shoulders. Swift Eagle rode beside her, sharing quiet stories and pointing out landmarks, but Alina could sense he was watching her, aware of the inner conflict she couldn't yet voice. On the third morning, they crested a hill, revealing her father's white hacienda gleaming in the distance. It should have brought relief, but instead, Alina felt an ache, as if something sacred was being left behind. "Your father will be happy to see you safe," Swift Eagle said softly. Alina nodded but stayed silent. She dreaded what awaited her. Family's expectations, the duties of her social status, and the looming marriage to Thomas, a man she didn't love. As they approached the estate, people poured out to greet them. Don Carlos stood on the porch, his face etched with emotion. When Alina dismounted, he embraced her tightly, tears streaking his weathered face. "Mia," he whispered, "I thought I'd lost you." She breathed in the scent of leather and tobacco familiar. Safe. But even in her father's arms, she felt herself looking for Swift Eagle, who stood respectfully nearby. "Papa," she said, turning. "This is David Running Wolf. He and his companions saved me." Don Carlos addressed Swift Eagle with formality but deep gratitude. "Name your price, and if I can pay it, I will." Swift Eagle shook his head. "Your daughter's safety is payment enough. You have been a friend to my people." Their words felt transactional to Alana, so different from the connection she had shared with Swift Eagle during their time alone. Still, her father insisted on a feast, but Swift Eagle declined politely, saying others awaited news of her safe return. Alana fought to smile as he mounted his horse. Their eyes met his gaze unreadable, hers full of the words she couldn't. "Say thank you," she said. "I will never forget what you did. Ya con Dios." "Alina Martinez," he replied. "May you find the happiness you seek." Then he was gone, and only when he disappeared over the hill did Alina realize her fists were clenched, her heart aching. That day was a blur. Relatives arrived. The kitchen bustled, servants prepared rose-scented baths, and everyone treated her like a cherished treasure returned. But Alina thought only of the sacred spring, of quiet talks by the fire, of Swift Eagle's question. Did she truly wish for the marriage to take place? That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Alina sat among luxury silk sheets, silver, brushes, and her mother's portrait, but felt more trapped than when held captive by bandits. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She expected a servant, but her father entered, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "You seem troubled, Mia," he said. Settling into the old chair by her window, Alina hesitated, then asked, "Papa, what do you know of David Running Wolf?" Don Carlos answered with unexpected respect. His mother was the sister of Chief Running Bear. His father was Mexican, taken in a raid. David chose to live with the Apache, but kept friendships in our world. He values freedom and honor above wealth. "You don't think less of him?" she asked. "Less? No. He builds bridges while others choose sides. He's prevented more bloodshed than we'll ever know." Gathering her courage, Alina said, "Papa, I don't think I can marry Thomas." Don Carlos went still. "You've had a shock, Alina. In time your doubts will fade. Thomas is kind. He'll care for you, but I don't love him," she said, voice trembling. "I respect him, yes. But after everything I've seen and felt, I can't pretend love doesn't matter." Her father frowned. "Then who will you marry? What kind of life will you have?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't spend my life wondering. What might have been if I'd been braver?" Don Carlos joined her at the window. They looked out toward the desert and mountains. "This is about David, isn't it?" She didn't deny it. "He helped me see that I have choices, that there are other ways to live." Her father sighed. "David is a good man, but the Apache way is vanishing. If you choose him, you may lose everything, or gain everything that truly matters," she replied. After a long pause, Don Carlos said quietly, "You are your mother's daughter. She once refused a wealthy match in Mexico City to marry a poor rancher me. Her family never forgave her." "I never knew," Alina whispered. "We hid it because we wanted you to value practical decisions. Perhaps we were wrong. Do you regret it?" "No. Your mother followed her heart, and I loved her all the more for it." Alina turned to him. "Then understand why I must be honest. I don't know what my future holds, but I know it can't include a life built on duty alone." Don Carlos studied her, then nodded. "We will send word to Thomas. The wedding is postponed." Relief flooded Alina, but also uncertainty. "And then?" she asked. Her father smiled, his eyes filled with something fierce and warm. "Then we'll see where the path leads. But whatever comes, you'll face it with courage." After he left, Alina returned to the window. In the distance, beyond the lights of the hacienda, the mountains stood dark against the starry sky. Somewhere, Out there, Swift Eagle sat by a fire, perhaps remembering their time together. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she had chosen her own direction, and that made all the difference. Sonnet for copy published. 3 weeks passed before Alina saw Swift Eagle again. She had spent those weeks in a strange state of suspension, neither fully part of her old life, nor yet committed to whatever new path lay ahead of her. The postponement of her wedding had caused quite a stir in Santa Fe society, with whispered speculations about what had really happened during her capture and rescue. Thomas Whitman had taken the news with the dignity she expected of him, expressing his willingness to wait as long as necessary for her to recover from her ordeal. His kindness only made Alina feel worse about her deception, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him the whole truth yet. She was sitting in her father's garden, reading a book of poetry her mother had loved, when one of the servants announced that David Running Wolf had arrived to see Don Carlos. Alina's heart leaped, but she forced herself to remain seated, pretending to concentrate on her reading while straining to hear the voices coming from her father's study. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, her father appeared. At the garden gate, Alina Sooner Running Wolf has brought news from Chief Running Bear. Would you join us in the study? Alina set down her book with hands that trembled slightly and followed her father inside. Swift Eagle stood by the window, looking out at the same desert landscape that had become Alina's constant companion over the past weeks. When he turned to greet her, she saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "Miss Martinez?" he said formally, but his eyes held warmth that the words didn't convey. "I hope you are well." "I am, thank you," Alina replied, equally formal, despite the chaos in her chest.
"Yes."
"And I hope your people are well also." Swift Eagle nodded, then turned. "To address Don Carlos, Chief Running Bear has asked me to extend an invitation to you and your family. He is hosting a gathering to celebrate the harvest season, and he wishes to honor the friendship between your families. Many of the neighboring ranchers and their families will attend, along with representatives from several Apache bands." Father looked intrigued. "This sounds like more than a simple harvest celebration." "It is," Swift Eagle admitted. "The chief believes that if Apache and Mexican families can come together in friendship, it might provide a model for peace that could spread throughout the territory. He has invited Governor Martinez from Santa Fe and several American officials. As well, Don Carlos stroked his beard thoughtfully. Ambitious undertaking. When would this gathering take place? In 1 week's time, at the Canyon of the Three Springs. It is neutral ground, sacred to all the Apache bands, and convenient for travel from the settlements. Alina found herself holding her breath. A week at an Apache gathering would be completely outside the bounds of her normal life. A chance to experience the world Swift Eagle had described during their journey together. "I think it is a worthy cause," her father said slowly. "But Alina has been through so much lately, perhaps the excitement would be too much for her." "On the contrary," Alina said quickly, earning surprised looks from both men. "I think it sounds fascinating. I would very much like to attend." Swift Eagle's eyes met hers, and she saw a spark of something that might have been hope. "The invitation specifically includes you, Miss Martinez. Chief Running Bear was impressed by the courage you showed during your ordeal. He believes you have the heart of a warrior." Alina felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. In her world, women were praised for their beauty, their modesty, their domestic skills. To be honored for courage was something entirely new. "Then it is settled," Don Carlos announced. "You will attend Chief Running Bear's gathering." The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparation. Alina's aunts were scandalized by the idea of her attending such an unconventional event, but her father held firm. Servants packed camping supplies and appropriate clothing, while Don Carlos made arrangements for the ranch to be managed in their absence. Alina found herself both excited and terrified. She would see Swift Eagle again, spend time in his world. But she still had no idea what she hoped would come of it. He had offered her no promises, made no declarations of feeling beyond friendship and respect. Perhaps she was building castles in the air based on nothing more than a few meaningful glances and some thoughtful conversations. The journey to the Canyon of the Three Springs took 2 days, and Alina was amazed by the number of people converging. On the gathering site, Mexican ranchers traveled alongside Apache families. American officials rode with Spanish traders, and children of all backgrounds played together around the campfires. Chief Running Bear turned out to be a man of impressive dignity, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. He welcomed Alina and her father personally, speaking in fluent Spanish and making them feel honored to be included in his celebration. "Your daughter has brought honor to both our peoples," he told Don Carlos. "She faced danger with courage and accepted help with grace. These are the qualities that build bridges between different worlds." Alina was assigned to a large tent shared with other unmarried women from various families, while her father stayed with the other male guests in a separate area of the camp. The mixing of cultures was unlike anything Alina had ever experienced, and she found herself fascinated by the conversations and customs she observed. On the second night of the gathering, there was a great feast followed by dancing and storytelling. Around a central fire, Alina sat with the other young women, watching as Apache warriors performed traditional dances that told the stories of their people. The rhythmic drumming and haunting melodies seemed to speak to something primitive and wild in her soul. She was so absorbed in the performance that she almost didn't notice. Swift Eagle, approaching her group, wore traditional Apache ceremonial dress with intricate beadwork and eagle feathers that marked his high status within the tribe. In the firelight, he looked like something from a legend. "Miss Martinez," he said quietly, extending his hand. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Elena's heart raced as she looked around at the other women, unsure of the proper etiquette. But the Apache women smiled encouragingly, and she realized that in this place, different rules applied. She took Swift Eagle's hand and let him lead her into the circle around the fire. The dance was unlike the formal waltzes of her upbringing, more of a celebration of movement and rhythm than a series of prescribed steps. Swift Eagle guided her gently, and Alina found herself moving to the ancient rhythms as if she had been born to them. As they danced, Swift Eagle leaned close enough to speak in her ear without others overhearing. "Are you happy to be here? More than I ever expected," Alina replied truthfully. "I feel like I'm seeing a world I never knew existed." "What do you think of this world?" he asked, spinning her gently under his raised arm. Alina looked around at the mixed gathering of peoples, at the children playing without regard for racial boundaries, at the adults sharing food and stories and laughter despite their different languages and customs. "I think it's beautiful," she said. "I think it's what the future could look like if people chose to build bridges instead of walls." Swift Eagle smiled, and Alina felt her heart skip a beat.